So much. I know you don't have a lot of time. Thank you so much for joining me here. We want to put the message out in Portugal about what's happening now. So maybe I'll start right away. And I hope your children are okay now and everything is okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so maybe starting with a recent development, German Chancellor Scholz rejected Julian's extradition. And does this bring hope to you and to Julian?
Yes, I see it as a major development. The first European leader, and Germany nonetheless, having come out in support of Julian not being extradited. But it follows off the back of a number of developments. The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture and the UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression both came out in recent weeks. Against the extradition, there was also a debate in the European Parliament in which both the European Council and the European Commission were asked to make statements about Julian's case. I think only one did. I think it was the Council. And there was careful wording, but not hostile to Julian, at least, and very strong statements from across the board from the European parliamentarians. So I think there has been a much better understanding of the risks of the stakes in Julian's case. And things like that debate at the European Parliament has allowed information, relevant information, to be shared and assimilated in bigger circles. And maybe that has led to the Chancellor Scholz's shift. But obviously it's something I welcome, and I see it as part of a bigger shift.
So do you expect that some major European leaders could join this position, or do you think they'll be cautious?
Well, they shouldn't be cautious, because Julian was selected by the European Parliament already in 2022 as one of the finalists for the Sakharov Prize, which of course is the peak EU award for freedom of conscience and human rights. And he was one of the 3 finalists. I was invited to the European Parliament, and I attended a number of meetings and so on. So the EU has the mandate by the Parliament to prioritize this case. I think also it's important for the journalist unions in the various European countries who have already, in many countries, given Julian membership or honorary membership, who have written statements about the extremely dangerous impact of this case on the work of journalists around the world and in Europe, to use this information, to use Scholz's statement to say, well, Scholz is saying it, we're saying it, why are, you should say it too, to the governments, to reflect the position of the journalistic unions. And I think the fact that Scholz has already said it makes it a lot easier for other European countries to say it. But as I said, they already have the mandate from the European Parliament that already selected Julian. And of course, he continues to win many awards all over Europe and around the world.
This is something that is really strange to be happening in the Western world, because we have a journalist, and also it's almost a case of a whistleblower that is being politically persecuted and could face his life is at risk. So do you find this for you? How do you feel about this?
Well, I think it's Julian's case is a kind of a symptom of where press freedom and freedom of speech is at in the West more generally. We've seen a very serious decay of the rights to freedom of expression and a much greater control over the press and communication generally online, and it tracks the persecution and harassment that Julian has faced since the publications of Iraq and Afghanistan and the cables and so on, which is what he is being prosecuted in relation to. I think that when WikiLeaks published this information back in 2010, this was kind of the peak of internet freedom of speech and press freedom. And since then, we've seen a backlash. And that backlash has affected, of course, Julian, but also affected everyone else. And Julian has been a canary in the coal mine over the years. What the ways in which Julian was attacked, first through the banks, shutting off donations to him. This was unheard of in 2010. It was the first case where we had this. And of course, this has become very generalized and extended to online platforms and demonetization and so on. But surprising in 2010, I'd say it was, yes, surprising. It was a kind of a dystopian prospect. In 2024, I think it is a sign of a generalized malaise that is affecting not just dissident voices or national security journalists, but rather there is an attack on dissent generally, and the tools to control dissent are much more sophisticated and effective today than they were 14, 15 years ago. So there's both a deterioration of the ability to enforce our rights, and at the same time a much greater strengthening of the ability to stifle dissent, to impose censorship, and to ultimately to suppress opposition.
And right now, Europe is trying to arm itself to go to war. We are now hearing about war economy. And do you believe that Europe and the world would be today different if Julian was free and working?
Well, I think it's no coincidence that at a time when we have major conflicts that are risking to escalate regionally or into nuclear conflict or world war, that the person who has contributed the most to exposing the true cost of war, the true motivations, the reality of the violence on the ground is in prison and being silenced. This is part of the same development. The war economy obviously sees Julian as a opposition figure, an opposition figure not only to the human cost of war, but to the economic, to exposing the economic interests that drive those wars. So it's of course convenient to the people who are profiting from war to have Julian in prison. And for those who want to see an end to these conflicts, getting Julian out is crucial. We probably would be in a different. We certainly would be in a different information landscape if Julian was would have been able to continue to do his work, because of course WikiLeaks is the gold standard of for whistleblowers involved, insiders inside the war machine who have exposed it from the inside and showed when policies have been out of control or contributed to there being oversight and reform. But
and one question I want to make is how do you gather the strength to continue this fight? Because it must be very hard. You have children, to see your husband in this situation and still fighting and speaking with the press and publicly. Where do you gather your strength?
Well, I get my strength from fighting for Julian. If I lose Julian, that's when I will struggle for real. I don't have difficulty in finding strength and motivation to fight for the freedom of my husband. The much greater fear I have is of losing him and of our children growing up without Julian. So I'm going to fight as long as it takes to get him back.
And how is he? Have you been speaking with him? You said that he's unwell. He's not okay. What can you say about him?
Well, he's not in a condition to even be able to attend his own hearing. This was the most decisive hearing of all, in which if the judges rule against him, then the UK basically steps out and puts him on a plane to the United States, unless the European Court of Human Rights puts a stop to it. So, of course, if Julian had not been imprisoned for 5 years, if he hadn't been in a state of steady decline physically over these years, he would, of course, have attended his own hearing, one in which his life hangs in the balance. But I hope it's obvious to everyone how bad things are. The fact that he wasn't able to. He's the prison is extremely harsh. He's in isolation a lot of the time. I mean, over 21, 22 hours a day. He's physically confined to a single cell of 6 square meters for that time. His interactions with other people are limited, and also with, he's closed. He's confined alongside very serious offenders, violent offenders, and so on. So it's also open-ended, and this takes an extremely serious toll on him, not just physically but mentally, of course. And that's a daily struggle. I mean, one day is more bearable, and other days are less bearable. So it's not possible to generalize, but in general, what I can say is that his physical health is in steady decline, and he has, of course, a fighting spirit, and he's encouraged by all the important support there is, both from supporters and political signals like the one of Scholz and so on. That is absolutely essential for him to keep fighting. But obviously it depends on the day and the week and what's happening and the pressure he's under.
And what do you expect? And I know you have to go. What do you expect of these proceedings? The court asked for more information. When can we have more information from the court now?
Well, we just don't know. Well, the only indication we had was that on Monday, the 4th, which was yesterday, there was a deadline for the parties to submit more information that the court asked for. It was a good sign that the court was asking for more information. I consider that the judges were engaged and seeking to get a better understanding of the background of the case and the various arguments that were being developed. So that's, of course, a good sign. but we simply don't have further deadlines. We could hear from the court any moment. I don't expect it to be, you know, today or tomorrow, because the information is you know, voluminous and significant, and they have to grapple with it. But that's not to say that it couldn't be very soon. So we're just waiting, but not remaining, you know, passive, because at the same time, this is when the judges are deciding, and statements like that of Scholz, and hopefully others will follow, of course, shape the environment in which this decision is going to be taken.
And finally, just to end, would you like to leave a message for the Portuguese supporters of Julian at this point?
Well, that support in Portugal is great. I was in Portugal, in Lisbon, just earlier for the Web Summit, actually. It was my first time in Portugal, and I fell in love with it. And I hope to be able to come back. And I told Julian all about Lisbon, because he said he hadn't been either. And I hope very much that once he's free, we will be able to visit together. But keep it up. It's really important for European decision makers at every level, you know, NGOs, people on the streets, but above all, the decision makers, to understand that Julian's fight is a fight that affects every European, not just journalists, but our right to know. And we're all being swept up in decisions about conflicts and so on, that we need to have at least have informed, have an informed understanding of. And Julian's contribution to informing the public is absolutely essential in a democracy. And as long as he's imprisoned, then that right is being denied. So we need to free him, and we need to strengthen our democracy and the culture around democracy globally. And Julian's freedom is essential for that.
Thank you so much for your time. I wish you well. I'm sure everyone will be praying for a good outcome, and we'll be following up everything. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you so much. Take care.